This is what we do, and you know that. It's 3:15 Eastern Time here on a college football Saturday. So with the games winding down from the noon window, which has been very curiously the best window of games just about every week this season. Typically, the best games are moved to the 3:30 or the primetime window, but for this college football season, and I know it's 2020, the best matchups and the best games have been in the noon window. So this is what we've got again today. Let's run it down here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We invite you to come step on in and join the live chat for the next, about a half hour. We'll get you set for the games that kick off right around 3:40, including North Carolina and Miami, Wisconsin, Iowa. Army and Navy, unfortunately, will be playing while everybody else is playing right now. Let's take a phone call here before we run down all the scores and all the big moments here. I've been locked in mostly on Utah and Colorado, checking out the end of this Nebraska-Minnesota game as well. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Well, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I continue to ride the Mark Rogers predictions for the week. Well, hey, you know what? I tell you what. I think I don't know what your record is against versus Steve Merrill, but I took. By the way, I took Georgia today.
Good.
And you called that one. I gotta say that. And I took Northwestern over Illinois, so I called it. So again, two Mark Rogers predictions. So good job on both, by the way, there, my friend.
I took Minnesota in the points in this game being played right now, and I took Utah as well, which was about a pick'em game, but I think Utah was about a 1.5 favorite, and I took Utah in that one.
Yeah, Utah doesn't look bad. I tell you what, Whittingham's a good coach.
Yeah,
I mean they're a good team.
Yes, they are. They played their first 3 games of the season against teams that had played multiple games, and they were playing their first game of the season in that first game at least, and then they've gotten better these last few weeks.
Hey Mark, how much did you get a chance to watch the 2 games I took, Georgia, Missouri, and then Northwestern, Illinois?
Virtually nothing.
Oh, okay.
I pretty much made Utah, Colorado my game of choice, and Nebraska, Minnesota to an extent, and I wanted that was pretty much my choice at this point. Yeah.
Well, see, by the way, I got to say this, and I'm going to shout out to my Georgia people. I'm watching the game, and I think Missouri, I'm kind of with you. I don't think Missouri is that great. Do you, Mark?
No, they just lost by 35 points. They haven't beaten anyone good.
They were that, right. That's what I'm saying. I mean, coming in, I didn't think they were that great is what I'm saying.
No.
Or I should have said. But I just have to say with Georgia, completely different team with JT Daniels. And you know what those Georgia fans got to be thinking is, what would this football team look like early in the year with Daniels at quarterback?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you're hearing, but
sure.
I mean, what do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I think it's the obvious question. I don't know at what point he was healthy enough to play. That is the question. But we know that he was active by, I think it was game 3 is when he was officially active and should have been ready to play. Now, only the coaches and Kirby Smart know what's going on in practice, but maybe there was just too much loyalty given to one Stetson Bennett. You can certainly credit and pat a kid on the back for saying, hey, we were in a tough spot. We lost the guy that we thought was going to be our starting quarterback. We selected somebody else. He faltered in the first game. You came in, you gave us something for 2 or 3 games. Thank you. But let's choose the best guy to lead us forward.
Yeah, because I'm not saying if they play Florida and Alabama again, it's a different story. But I'd like to see it with JT Daniels. I really would like to see both of those games again with JT Daniels at quarterback versus Stetson Bennett. And I guess you saw some DeJuan Mathis, who was even worse in the Florida game, by the way. He was bad. But, yeah, I mean, if JT Daniels plays both of those games, Mark, what do you think? You think I would say we're looking at different games because Alabama is playing at such an incredible level right now. It's ridiculous, by the way. But I just wonder with Daniels if those games, or at least, down to the wire, and maybe Georgia has a chance. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a reason that even though I think Alabama is substantially better than Florida, or decidedly better than Florida, that Georgia played a better game against Alabama. They were in the game with 7 or 8, 10 minutes left. It's that they had their defense together. Their defense was healthy, and Stetson Bennett played a decent first half before he just collapsed in the second half. Now against Florida, Georgia was missing 5 defensive starters, and Richard LeCounte's one of their best defensive players. They were missing playmakers all over the place on defense. So yeah, if they had a healthy team plus JT Daniels, I'm not going to predict what would have happened. I would think, but you posed the question. So if all teams are healthy, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, they play and JT Daniels starts those games, I say Alabama wins a 10-point game, and Georgia and Florida go down to the wire.
Right. That's about right. That's about right. I think with JT Daniels, I think the Georgia-Florida game's closer to a coin flip.
Yep.
And I think they may play Alabama to about a 10-point game, which they lost by 17 points with Stetson Bennett. So maybe it's a 10-point game with JT Daniels. So
maybe it's closer than that. Because he not to pin it on one guy, but he pretty much turned the game around from in a negative sense by trying to do too much and missing guys, and that's difficult to measure when your quarterback's killing drives by throwing picks and just missing guys that are open that are going to convert plays into first downs. Then that just that's a game killer.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's been more competitive. Hey, on to the Northwestern game, which I watched, by the way. Your man crush, Pat Fitzgerald, continues to just do an awesome job. I mean, I know you don't like that term, Mark, but I got to throw it out there.
Well, there's a reason there's a man crush there. Of course he does an outstanding job.
No, I'm a Fitzgerald fan. I think, there's a guy that overperforms a large percentage of the time, nearly every year, and I think they're a solid football team. And furthering my point from last night, by the way, as we were getting into that Dotmo conversation I had with Pigskin Pete, if Ohio State is 6-0 and beats a top 15 to maybe top 12 team, we'll see where Northwestern's ranked this week, and then has a top 10 to 12 win over Indiana with a conference championship, I still think that looks better than what do we got with Texas A&M, 9-1, and beating, a good, really top 6 or 7 win with Florida, and then no other good wins. And then they got dusted the other time they played a good football team, albeit the number 1 team in Alabama. So, I don't know, Mark. That looks a little bit better than Texas A&M's resume, if you ask me. What do you think?
Well, I think there's 2 things to determine, and that's number 1, what do you personally believe is a better resume, and then trying to predict what does the committee believe. Well, the committee's already played its hand. They've already considered Ohio State to be the 4th best or have the 4th best resume, and Texas A&M to be 5th. Therefore, the only thing Texas A&M can do is play Tennessee, which is a 2-win football team, and Ohio State playing, as you mentioned, a top 15 and maybe a little bit higher than that team in the country. So in my eyes, there is absolutely no way that Texas A&M, even if they go out and beat Tennessee 50-0 and Ohio State beats Northwestern 28-27, I don't think that you evaluate that as being a better win, beating a 2-win team versus beating a team in the top 15 in the country. So I think they've already determined, and if anything else results from that, then they're nuts, and the whole thing should be blown up if they're going to leapfrog a 5 over a 4 after they beat a 2-win team and the 4 beats a top 15 team. Then the whole system's even worse than I thought.
Right. Well, I mean, Pete was trying to point out quality wins last night and put Florida out there as a quality win. All I'm saying is if Ohio State gets that win next week, that's 2 quality wins versus 1 quality win. And if you want to throw in the conference championship as the other data point, I think that only helps the cause.
Well, it depends what you consider a quality win. You got to determine and define what's a quality win.
Well, I mean, would you say two top 10 win and a top 15 win are quality win?
Oh, those are definitely quality wins in my eyes, but it's obviously it's a sliding scale. To me, there's not a quality win and a not quality win. I don't think there's as soon as a team's not ranked, they're not a quality win. I was making the point last night to somebody that the reason Wisconsin's not ranked is because they just lost to Indiana. So somebody's telling me that Indiana didn't have a top 25 win. Well, they beat a top 25 team and they knocked them out of the top 25. So you can't rate Wisconsin, a win over Wisconsin and a win over Troy as the same, as neither one being a quality win. It's a sliding scale. It's not just one or the other.
Okay. I mean, I'm just looking at, well, right. I mean, because I know with your top 25, that makes sense. You put a fair amount of emphasis on the quality victories.
Sure.
That's where you rank the football teams. And I get what you're saying on the sliding scale, but I mean, Indiana, next week goes 7-1. There's probably a very good chance they're going to end up as a top 10 win. So if you said Indiana went 7-1 and ends up in where I think they may have a chance to end up in a New Year's Six bowl game, and they end up as a top 10 ranked football team, which I think they could end up being if they end up 7-1 in the final rankings, then and then Northwestern at the time you played them in the Big Ten title game is within the top 15, and you beat them and give them their only second loss of the year. I don't know. Those sound like two quality wins to me.
Well, it's not difficult off the top of my head to review Texas A&M's games just because they played 10 games. It will be 10 games in the SEC period. Indiana obviously is only playing. They're only up to 7 games currently. So I don't think there's any question, and I don't know what your conversation was with Pigskin Pete, but that Indiana, no, we're arguing Ohio State, Texas A&M, that Ohio State's best 2 wins, granted, they got to beat Northwestern next week, are better than Texas A&M's 2 best wins. Now, Texas A&M's best win, certainly most people would agree, and I would rate it to be better than Ohio State's best win, but Ohio State's 2 best wins are better than Texas A&M's. But if you go through the depth of the schedule, I got to think that Texas A&M played a better schedule, because then you go to the 3rd game and it's maybe Texas A&M's second best win is Auburn. That's not okay.
Right. No, I was going to ask you that. Who do you think their second? Because they obviously didn't play Georgia this year, which right now is right there as I think with Daniels, as we were talking about, right there with Georgia or with Florida, and certainly I believe Texas A&M is the second best team in the SEC in my eyes.
They're 7-1 right now, correct? They're 7-1. They missed a game.
Who? A&M?
That they're not going to make up against Ole Miss.
Right.
So they didn't play Ole Miss.
I thought they were 8-1.
No, there was a 10-game schedule to start the season, and they missed a game. So they're only going to play one more game. So they beat LSU, they beat Auburn, they beat Mississippi State and Arkansas. That's 4. Vanderbilt's 5. South Carolina is 6. And Florida's 7. It's not an impressive run. For as much as I think the SEC is the best conference, it's Auburn's a top 40 team, and that's their second best win.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. As I was saying, I said this to Pete. I mean, this isn't your older brother's SEC. I mean, it's not the SEC maybe of the last couple of years ago as far as strength of the conference. Although, like I said, I think right now I would say you've got 4. You have the best team, and then I think you have 3 other probably top 10 teams, which is still a really strong conference. Don't get me wrong. So. What is the Big Ten? You have a top 4 team, and then you have 2, maybe a top 10 team and a top 15 team, which isn't bad, but isn't quite the SEC as we've seen the last couple of years. So in some ways, we're kind of somewhat comparable to, let's say, the last year or two, would you say?
Well, as I mentioned, I don't know if you heard my conversation with 28AD28 about Iowa State, is that people, I believe, are getting hung there. We are mixing up the apples and the oranges because the schedule's not the same, and therefore the records aren't going to be the same, meaning that we get hung up on the final record. Of course, that's the first criteria in rating and evaluating a team. But just take a league like the SEC, they've gone from playing 8 games against each other to playing 10 games against each other and eliminating all non-conference games, all those FCS and Group of 5, and even the Power 5 matchups. The SEC wins like 85% of those games. So the records aren't going to look nearly as good as they typically do. The Big Ten has played, all those teams have played anywhere roughly between 5 and 7 games right now. All those FCS and MAC games and all that are gone. So the records aren't going to look as good. So that's why everybody's sitting around saying, look at the Big Ten. It's full of a bunch of 2-3 and 2-2 and 2-4 teams. Well, of course, the record is going to be 500 when you add it all up from the conference.
You know, it's too bad the Big Ten didn't get a typical year out of Penn State or a typical year out of that team up north, when the conference would be in that much better standing. Further proof that you need your blue blood programs to be playing at least fairly good levels for the conference to be at a really good level.
Yeah, so I'm not as much a believer in that, but I get the point. You need somebody to be good.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ohio State fans have talked about that for years. That's the banting about, do you need, the team up north to be good? I would agree. First of all, I want everybody Ohio State to go 11-1. I want our schedule to look as good as it possibly can. But I do think it helps when the major programs are good because they're the most likely teams to be good anyway. So if you have a typical year where, Penn State's a top 10 program, which they've been, in the past, and then, the team up north is a top 15 program, which they've been in the past, then the conference definitely does look a lot better with a very good Northwestern and an Indiana team that's having a really good year. Although, the
point I'm making is that people assign those positions, whereas the Big Ten may finish this season, and aside from Ohio State, Northwestern, Indiana, and Iowa might be those 3 top 15 teams.
Yeah, we just switched the teams around, right? All right, my friend. Well, I'm going to dig into these late games. You're going to run the live stream tonight?
We will be on live here after the primetime games.
All right, I may hit you back later. Have a good night.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, what do we have here? 3:35. We're about 5 minutes away from kickoff here. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. If somebody wants to give me a ring, and also North Carolina and Miami kickoff here in about 5 minutes. I'm going to do a live stream following the Miami-North Carolina game on the Miami channel. Miami channel, the notification will go out here in the next 10 or 15 minutes. We're going live after the game. And I did want to catch everybody up on where we stand, although you guys have the internet yourselves, I believe. Let's run it down here. I'll let you know what hit me. Again, Utah, Colorado was my game of focus at noon, and I did start to watch the Northwestern Illinois game, but man, I don't know what's going on with the scheduling this year, and I know the cancellations have a lot to do with it, but to where the noon window has been by far the best window. Like there were like 7 or 8 decent games, good games to watch. I'm not talking about top 5 teams in the country, but I'm talking decent, good games to watch. And then the rest of the day, there's like 2 really good games at 3:30. And then in prime time, 1 or 2, 3. All right, Maryland leads Rutgers 24-21, late fourth quarter. Rutgers has the ball. All right, we also have Army-Navy are set to go. No, they've kicked off. There's 5 minutes left in the first quarter. No score. Oklahoma State and Baylor are underway. Penn State beat Michigan State 39-24. Penn State exploded with 2 late touchdowns to break open a 25-24 game. We will do some post-game analysis on that. Alabama just rolled Arkansas 52-3. Best team in the country. until proven otherwise. Georgia, we talked to Dave about it with JT Daniels at the controls, beat a Missouri team that was ranked 25th by the College Football Playoff Committee coming into the week. Why, I don't know. I know that their record was 5-3 and they play in the SEC. But if you dug a little further down than that, I don't think it was justified. Georgia wins by 5 touchdowns. Northwestern goes to the Big Ten championship game at 6-1. They beat Illinois 28-10. Utah looked extremely impressive in the second half. I took a ton of notes on that game. Maybe I'll do a post-game riff on that. Utah 38-21 over Colorado. Unfortunately, that does not push or pressure USC into having to win, of course, to make a college football playoff. And I know people would chuckle at that. But for USC to stay undefeated, of course, they have to win. But they have now made the Pac-12 championship game by way of Colorado losing to Utah. I wanted the Buffs to win the game, even though I picked Utah to put the pressure on USC and force that gotta-win situation, must win. Minnesota beat Nebraska 24-17. Nebraska had a situation late in that game. They were down 24-14. They kicked a field goal with 6.5 minutes left. Minnesota was offsides. Nebraska took the first down. I don't disagree with the decision made by Scott Frost to take the points off the board, but if you're in that position, you're at the 25-yard line. They were closer than that. They're in the red zone. You got to score now. It took them 2 minutes to then rip off another 3 plays, not get a first down, have to kick a field goal, and so they're in the same position, kick the field goal, down 24-17, but they killed 2 minutes off the clock. Minnesota ran out the clock and won 24-17. Louisville over Wake Forest 45-21. Louisville is one of those teams that went just off the radar early, and nobody's really talking Louisville football right now, but 45-21, they win over Wake Forest. Again, at 3:30, Miami, North Carolina, Iowa, Wisconsin are the 2 games that I want to see. And we also have Houston, Memphis, Duke, Florida State, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Jeremy Pruitt and company not having a good second half of the season there at Tennessee. And let's see what's happened with this Rutgers-Maryland game. We now have $1:40 left. Rutgers with the football at midfield against Maryland. Rutgers looking to pull it out or maybe kick a field goal and send that baby into overtime. I'm going to be locked in again on North Carolina, Miami, and also Wisconsin, Iowa. Those are my 2 games at 3:30. We'll get you some post-game of those, instant analysis. And again, join us on the Miami channel after the Miami, North Carolina game. That should be a good one right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We will see you tonight as well. You'll get the notification right here. We'll be live after the primetime games, roughly 11 o'clock, USC, UCLA, LSU, Florida, and others. See you soon. I'll check out the live chat, see if you've got anything there for me. Super Chat's on. Subscribe. Please hit the like button as well. Yes, we've certainly talked about, well, people in the chat were talking about the Ohio State commitment they received from the #1 wide receiver in the country, a kid out of Washington, Emeka Egbuka, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but I will get that down, of course, once he steps on the field. And I just actually watched a 15-minute interview with him with, what's the name of the, can't think of the site, the Ohio State site. Letterman's Row. Yes, that's it. They went out there and talked to Egbuka. Good interview about him choosing Ohio State. Sooner Thrawn is telling us that they just announced Tom Herman's back at Texas next year in 2021. That's going to be huge for him. Hot seat. Got to get it done in 2021, I would think. Yeah, Cheryl, #1 wide receivers coming to Ohio State 3 consecutive years. Also the #1 player in the country for 3 consecutive recruiting classes. And I don't see anything else that I need to respond to. So I appreciate everybody jumping in here. Scott Frost is fine for right now. He's back for 2021. There's no question about that. He'll be there. All right, everyone, let's watch some football. See you back here after the late games, not the late games, but the primetime games, and also again on the Miami channel after North Carolina and Miami.